hopefully that siren, whatever it is, isn't anything too ominous. So I'm basically going to hand over completely now to Alan and Graham and Kath, who are going to take us through the day, starting with a synthesis of all the work you've been doing this morning. And I think they've probably got some more work in mind for you. But Graham, Alan, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Nick. We have about 20 minutes. We're running about 10 minutes behind schedule, but you look like you needed a longer lunch than we had planned, so that's fine. For about the next 15, 20 minutes, we're going to give you our take on what we heard this morning and what we've seen on the charts that you populated. Going to be quite a quick run through. It's not going to be complete. We're not going to talk about every single post-it note, but during lunch, we have tried to cluster things and try to identify some themes coming out of those 4 time windows, time horizons that we talked about earlier. Do that for about 20 minutes, and then we're going to get back into table discussions. You can move around, you can join different tables if you want to, or you can stay in the same tables. And we're going to set you 3 questions that have about 25, 30 minutes each to hear from you. So lots and lots of work for you to do this afternoon. And then we'll try to tease it all back into the room and leave the afternoon with a coherent picture of where we are and where we need to be going, what's missing going forward. So, Graham, do you want to take us through those clusters and our work from the break?
I'll have a go, Alan. First of all, thank you for all this material. We've done our best, a kind of first cut of, so nothing's been wasted. Not everything appears here that came up in your table discussions. There's a kind of loose clustering here. And part of our commitment is to provide a report of all of this anyway, so there will be chances to refine this and look for other patterns. And I'm going to do a kind of live looking for patterns and hope that you all notice them better than I do as I go through what showed up. So we start with the starting position here. We've clustered them together and given them names. I'll just go through the headlines. So, and hopefully you'll recognize this from the conversation we had this morning. So first up, these pinks are the concerns. Concern about committed emissions, even now. Concern about the complex architecture. This is hugely complex, fragmented industry, etc., etc. Concern about crew training. Again, present position. Lack of resilience. A lack of a systems view and circularity. So even now, our conversations seem to be siloed. And that's, again, a part of the starting position, a concern. Concern about policy and politics, the political infrastructure, lack of policy. I think it was Stuart that said, you know, we have to keep engaging the politicians. Lack of political infrastructure there. We're concerned about that. Lack of understanding or partial understanding. I guess that relates to the lack of a systems view or circularity. Yeah, we just don't seem to understand the gravity or the full all of the dimensions of the problem. There are a couple of ones down here that I didn't understand. I think that was maybe about the absence of coffee at the tables, and other things. You'll understand those better than me. Hopeful ideas, good ideas and innovations. Here's an idea, ask the mariners, the people who actually have experience of being in the system. Measurement and certification are improving, that's good. And a list of quick wins. So what we've been talking about, the technologies that are ready and in some cases already proving themselves. So there's a bunch of quick wins. Hopeful, there's some hopeful innovations. Actually, big overlap with the quick wins. Efficiency of existing vessels, the new technologies for ship propulsion, amending the charter partnering contracts, if I've read that right. And the big cluster of hope here is that everyone's on board. I mean, that was the kind of message that came out this morning. Consumers, government, the healthcare system, industry, all these hopeful declarations, everyone is on board. That's our starting position, 2021. When we moved into the, excuse me, the exploration, again, quick wins, lots of blue here. The quick wins, operational changes, electrification of ports, stuff that's already happening or in the pipeline. Governance and policy, ideas for, these are ideas for if we're going to do the exploration exploration and the experimentation. Let's do them in the governance and policy area as well. Picking up on the crew training. How about some crew training and adopting new practices on existing vessels. Growing public awareness. What else? Those are the innovations, but still, quite a lot of pink here, quite a lot of concern. That concern. Okay, we're into the next decade, but what should we prepare for? What should we prepare for? A concern about that. A need for regulation. We heard that from a lot of people. We need regulation, please. That would help us prepare. The left behind. What about support required for ship owners in developing countries or those with few ships? And that we're just too slow. Through this decade we'll be too slow is a concern. I put the big cluster here about fuels, energy sources, whether it's about a new fuel or getting more efficiency out of existing ones. I put this down as the fuel versus energy versus efficiency concern. That debate will continue and hamper progress through this transition zone. What else have we got down here? The pace and payment for change. Who's going to pay for it? Will we be fast enough? Can we prove the solutions? Resistance and loopholes. I guess that comes back to the governance again. We may come up with all the right numbers and still fail because they weren't true. Not enough systems thinking. No sandbox. A bit more energy needed in the innovation system if we're going to get through this transitional decade. And then the sources of hopeful innovations again. Some of the declared ambition, which showed up in 2021. Healthcare getting involved is also hopeful, which shows that government, in a way, is taking a lead as well, not through regulation but through purchasing power, shifting economic patterns in this transition zone, and learnings from indigenous peoples. Maybe they can help us get through this transition. When we come on to the scaling up piece, so it's interesting. In the starting position, we had quick wins coming through that decade of change. We had the quick wins as well. Here we're into scaling up. So interestingly, there was still, we will still be experimenting with other with a range of technologies. So there was not a kind of lock-in there. These are the kind of hopeful, the good ideas and innovations, incentivizing the transition. So a kind of incentivizing on a systemic level rather than simply individual technologies or innovations. That's picked up here as well. Collaborative innovation. In the scaling up, we're doing much more systemic work together. Design and build for the new system. That comes back to the shipbuilding and design and construction. So we've got a sense of the new system here, and so we can do systemic collaborative innovation and design and build for it. Let's see, what else have we got? We've still got some concerns. Lack of finance. It'd be great to incentivize the transition, but what if we don't? Lack of incentives, same thing. Risk of making the wrong or no choices. So what if we scale up the wrong thing? Hindsight would be wonderful. Or what if, because we're afraid of scaling up the wrong thing, we don't scale up anything? So that was a concern. What about the old stock, the stranded assets? What about the old ships? What are we going to do with them? Ship recycling, decommissioning. This same worry about about loopholes. We'll get through this decade as well triumphantly, but net zero is not true zero. We will have taken our own green speak and treated it as gospel. Worries about inequality again. Yes, some of us will come through, but not everybody. And new infrastructure. Maybe we'll have a great idea in this first decade, but actually investing in the pervasive infrastructure will be beyond us. And big companies buy the good ideas to include in their catalogue. That's right, and the innovators earn very little. So who captures the rewards in this scaling up section? A few, again, hopeful initiatives occur throughout the pattern. Hope here, yeah, as well as kind of scaling up our new shipping system. How about improving human behavior, shipping less, buy less stuff that we don't want? I translate that four-letter word. And here, zero emission shipping. You know, what we're scaling here, where we get to the end of this, by 2040 we do have the zero emission shipping with a variety of energy sources. And a couple of people commented that, and you can see actually, you know, we get fewer post-it notes when we get to the destination, because I think people took on board, you know, the destination happens here. That in a way this is a kind of direction of travel, but we have to have reached the destination by 2040, as a number of speakers said. But when we get to the destination, what do we say? What do we see here? Well, we still see some concerns that we're not going to get there, that we won't do enough, that by 2050, you know, we haven't done all of that, and so we're not there. However, you know, if we are there, we're in the circular system. Came up here right at the start somewhere about circularity and systems thinking. Here we're in the circular economy. We're in a circular system. We're thinking in terms of circularity and ecosystemic thinking. Again, there's still hopeful practice. There's still innovation. Just because we've got there, we don't stop innovating. And I leave this last but not least. We hope we are successful. So that's the summary of what came out of the conversation for us this morning.
Is there anything that strikes you as missing? Any themes that you expected to see emerge from this that we haven't spoken about there? Anything that we need to add on as big sort of headlines? One, for example, somebody mentioned to me during lunchtime, is that the next generation didn't really appear on any of those post-it notes, and I guess it's because we didn't give you the opportunity to write anything down on post-it notes after hearing from Sophie and Vary. So it could have been that, you know, that may have been a theme that we could add into that. Any others you want to kind of shout out before we move on to the next bit of discussion?
Or any pattern that you noticed that we haven't noticed? I mean, how does that strike you as a story? Quite pink. It's quite pink, yes.
Yeah, particularly the left-hand board there is probably at least 50% pink post-it notes. A bit more balance on the right-hand side of that, but that's quite a long way out. Linear, not regenerative. Yeah. So there's a path that we're following, and kind of we're on that journey, and maybe. Yeah, so it's business as usual rather than transformational. Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things we're going to do in the table discussions this afternoon is try and move beyond business as usual, and actually just challenge some of the things that are in that business as usual, and challenge some of the patterns that may sit in the way that we work, and give us some opportunities to think through it differently and to take different types of action. Okay. So what we're going to do, as I said, there's three discussions we're going to give you, and we've got a different worksheet for each one. So the first one that you see on your tables there, I think it's on most of the tables. We're missing one from here. May have run away, but we'll get you one. We're going to be talking about, we've called it right doings, wrong doings, not doings. So it's the patterns of behavior, patterns of action that we see right now. We've identified three enablers there. So at your tables, you can decide to talk about the whole thing, or if you want to focus in, because, for example, you've got a lot of people who are involved in the finance system, or in the policy system, or in pioneering activity. If you want to focus just on one of those three, just circle that word at the top of it and just focus your discussion on that. And what we're really looking at is what are the things that are being done and what are the things that are not being done, which should be done, that you see in the system at the moment. And again, use the post-it notes just to write those down fairly briefly, and we'll gather them in at the end. We'll probably hear just a few highlights before we move on to the second discussion, and then we'll bring all three discussions together in the last section of the agenda today. So talk through it, jot down the ideas. The things, right doings particularly, are things that are being done for the right reasons. Wrongdoings are the things that are happening already, but that might be happening for other reasons. They're propping up the system. They're keeping things going. They're delivering on commitments that have already been made, but they aren't going to be the transformative actions that will take us where we need to by 2030, 2040, 2050. And the not doings, things that just aren't happening, things that are vital for this transformation to happen, but aren't being done. So it's to Stuart's point. Is really looking at, how do we make this a transformative set of action rather than just business as usual. So we're describing business as usual. So is that clear? If you want to move tables, there's one table over there with a lot of people around it, and that's absolutely fine. But if you want to move around, want to speak to different people, want to meet people, or you had a really good conversation at lunchtime that you want to continue, whatever your reasons are for moving, that's absolutely fine. We've got plenty of space in the room. We're going to give you, it's now 2:25. We'll give probably 25 minutes for this one. Graham, Kath, and I will wander the room. We'll listen into bits of your conversation. If you've got questions about what you've been asked to do, ask us. If you're going off on tangents, we'll maybe redirect you. We might think those tangents are interesting and not redirect you. So we've got 25 minutes, and at 10 to 3, we'll check in with 3 groups, just find out just what happened there, give you a 5-minute comfort break, and then we'll carry on with the next discussion. Okay, thank you. Got a little bit quieter straight away. Maybe that's a sign that you're ready to to talk about something else. So what I want to do just now, we're going to leave you with those sheets. The next conversation is going to build on what you just did, but we just wanted to find out, did the conversation work? Was it meaningful? Any big insights popped out of that already? Not hearing from every single table, but if we could get 2 or 3 voices into the room to share something about what happened in their bit of the conversation, that'd be interesting. And just to talk about, one big insight, one big theme, something that happened that was maybe unexpected in the conversation. Anyone want to volunteer to do that? I can move over the microphone anywhere in the room. Okay, just give a second.
Okay. Our conversation took 2 directions. The first one was thinking about countries and how countries can be pioneering and have policy and finance. And we thought of Norway. So we thought Norway is very pioneering. The reason it's pioneering because it has policies around renewable energy and they put money into R&D. So that was an example of how that chain works. And then we talked about the IMO. And we started off on a positive side, which said really IMO have got really good policies and regs. They put that out. However, it takes forever. And then we started having a conversation about, do they put money into an R&D? And we said, yeah, we think they do, but it also takes a long time. So I suppose we got to the place that we thought the IMO could be far more effective if governments of the world give them more space to actually operate in and more autonomy so that they could move at pace.
Okay.
So we felt the IMO needed to be restructured through government help to actually get some pace because there was a total lack of pace.
Okay, so it's good as a recognition they're doing something right, but also something that's could be done a lot better. So that's good, ideal, perfect. Anything similar come up in another table or anything, I think just completely unconnected? Oh.
We talked about some of the barriers in the IMO, and one of the things that I think there's like a misunderstanding. There's this obsession about consensus, and there's nothing in the IMO like set up that you have to have consensus. And I think when we're talking about how do we get good policy? And we have in COP space, we're saying, should we actually have fossil fuel people, not present? Like, what does that look like in the IMO? But I think, like, one of the things that we could change is this, like, to say that we don't need to have consensus, and maybe on some things some people are just not going to agree, and they're dragging and delaying, and actually if like the management in the IMO was actually to say, you know what, yeah, on this thing we're not going to get consensus, but we've got majority here and majority want to move, then I think that would unlock things. So I just want to, is there anyone here who doesn't agree with me and thinks that actually the IMO is set up and it has to get consensus? No, it doesn't, does it?
No, I'm just agreeing.
Yeah. And exactly, it has to have, and then you do get stuck with the like structure of who's got power and the flag states and agreement with like 66% of the fleet or whatever. But still, if you went to the event at the IMO on, what night was it? Tuesday night, like a couple of nights ago, Kitak Lim Open was saying, he was like reiterating consensus. And you're just like, maybe that's one of the barriers. Like when you're talking about like what do we need to do to restructure it there so we move faster? Maybe like that idea is one of the mind shifts that needs to happen.
Great, thank you very much. Any thoughts from other tables, either on that topic or on other things that came up?
Thanks. This is, I don't know, we did discuss this on our table, and some of this is personal thoughts as well, but it keeps coming back to me, why are we trying to decarbonize shipping? What's the driver? Is it because we have to decarbonize shipping? I'd argue it's because we need a healthy planet to live on. We need a healthy biosphere. And this then brings us to our next thought, is defining what our end point is from all these activities that we wish to undertake. Because the end point is absolutely critical to put into our environmental sat-nav so that we can plot the pathway. And I'm not 100% clear what this end point is. I think I know what it is. But I'm just really interested in trying to have a stab at defining what a healthy biosphere is, and then work backwards from that, and then try and picture what the ships look like in that healthy biosphere, what the oceans look like beneath the surface. And then I think we can start to plot that course to that utopia.
Okay, thank you. Time for one more comment from another table about something that they talked about. We don't have to. Oh, here one.
I'm going to get on one of my high horses and deliver a lecture, I'm afraid, and you will all hate it. There is no carbon price on shipping emissions. And we need a carbon price to help people change their behavior, to help investors come and reduce the carbon emissions, to reduce the burden on the funding agencies, and to generate funds for the new technology coming forward. That's my sermon. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. We're going to, one last one from the table in the middle there. I don't know if it's a response to what you just heard or a separate point.
Yeah, no, just to come back on that, I think just on the carbon pricing, I think it's true that we need some form of carbon pricing, but we also need to really remember that we have a goal which is keeping within the carbon budget, and unfortunately carbon pricing alone isn't going to do it. So I think one of the things we need to do is have an honest conversation with everyone and realize that when we say in COP that everyone agrees, that's not true. And then there are big fault lines underneath all of this. And so we need to be aware of that, and we need to be aware of why these fault lines are there, who has vested interests in certain things. And we need to say, okay, listen, how are we going to get within the carbon budget to 2050? There are ways to reduce emissions now. There are ways to reduce emissions midterm. We need to be serious about doing those. So I think we need to have a sincere, serious conversation and realize that we know how to get to 2050, and maybe we're being kind of delayed.
Okay, thanks. We're going to keep on moving. The next discussion we're going to have at our tables, we've got a second sheet which we're going to distribute in a moment. And it's really looking at what are the patterns between what we spoke about in the morning, which we summarised or attempted to summarise. We maybe just simplified beyond recognition. But what are the patterns between there and what you talked about the patterns of behaviour there? If you can imagine, you just arrived on this planet, having not experienced any of this before, and you spotted a world that was dealing with the situation that you described there currently, with the hopes and concerns that you have currently, and through to 2050, the destination that this world wanted to reach, and you saw an industry or a species acting the way that you've just described, doing some things right, but doing some things wrong, and not doing some of the things that are really, really important. What would you, as a visitor to this planet, think that race had to believe in order to be acting this way? So what's behind this pattern of activity that you've just documented, these right doings, wrong doings, not doings? What would make sense of that pattern of activity, given what we've said about where we need to reach and the pressures that are in the system and the hopes that we have, the concerns we have? So are we doing enough? And if we're not doing enough, why is that the case? So it's a bit of an abstract conversation, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, trying some worldview on that says, does that make sense of this? You don't actually have to believe those things that you write down in this next discussion. You just say, that belief would make sense of this. Does that make sense? So yeah, write down those assumptions and beliefs on a post-it and put it onto the worksheet that Kath is bringing. Oh, yeah, actually, you can write them directly onto the sheet. Yeah, don't need to use post-it notes. So what are the assumptions and beliefs that somebody would have to hold in order to be acting in the way you've just described in the face of this situation that we're in just now and we're trying to get to? Okay? Any volunteers to go first? Share us a little bit of the conversation? Oh.
I'm going to try to sum up what we say, because what we talked about and what we wrote down are actually quite different. And I think I can sum it up to say that that most humans are very, very short-sighted, that human as a species, we look maybe, for the most part, maybe 2 years out in our understanding of our impacts. We're primarily egocentric. We have very much are still locked into animal behavior, almost to the point of parasites destroying our own hosts. But we who are innovators are also in a position now of creating niche markets, beginning to work together to create a new market sector that will eventually influence policy and shift the status quo. So really, I think what we would say is it's down to us who have the long-range vision to take action now and not wait for regulators or for anyone else. Start creating lateral contracts, working together to create the change that's then going to push the ultimate long-term change in the greater market.
Perfect. That's a great example of it. So we're acting as if we can only be short-term, but we're still innovating. So there's something that's not quite matching up between those two perspectives. But you have the people in the room to actually do something about it. And the next discussion is going to be, so what are you going to do about it? And some of which we've talked about already, but there may be some new things there. So perfect example, that's the thing that would make sense of this pattern, is that short-termism. But it's not there, and it's not in everybody. So we have some hope. Good. Another table want to share something that came up in their discussion. You can start picking on people. Or get Kath to wander and just give the microphone to someone. Oh, right from the far end of the room.
No, I'm not going to do it now. I've been told I've been talking too much. Okay. Hello there. So one of the things that I think makes all of this very much makes sense of it all to an alien would be finding a load of alcoholics or drug addicts that are addicted to an energy source that is abundant, is extremely cheap, and pretty much damages your planet. And the reaction to that is either you go into complete denial, put your head in the sand, it'll fix itself. You go into in and out of rehab. So you get on there, you try to do something, it fails, you go back. Or at the other end, you may find a real evangelical approach where you found that golden bullet or that silver bullet, if you like, and you become an evangelical believer in that, regardless of the actual efficacy of that solution. So you don't tend to challenge it, you just believe in it. And I think that tends, for me at least, makes sense of a lot of the behaviors that I see, is that addiction behavior. So
great, perfect. And we'll chew that one over in the next session as well. So how do we turn that around? How do address that? What are the alternatives, and how would we act if we believed something else? Some other examples? What we'll be doing, we'll be gathering up the sheets that you've worked on, whether you've written on them, whether you put post-it notes on them. We'll gather all of those in, and we'll write that up. So there's no need to, voice them into the room right now. We'll capture them anyway. But just if you think there's something particularly thought-provoking that others in the room need to hear before we go into the next session this afternoon. Oh, got another volunteer here.
Hello, everyone. I firmly believe that we need a ruthless approach, especially for the time being, against anybody that is entertaining the idea of climate change hoaxing. We can have conferences, we can meet, we can discuss ideas, we can set policies, but when there is a singled out group that is acting as a cancer and that is isotoping and politicizing climate change as a hoax, this cannot go unanswered. This cannot go unchecked. This needs to be tackled, this needs to be engaged, and this needs a more ruthless approach. And thank you.
Thank you. One more from this table, and then we'll move on to the next discussion.
So I had the microphone put in my hand for this one. Just something I wrote down, and that's the assumption that I think someone would make looking at this, our societies at the moment, is that inequality is good.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Oh, one more from this table. Once we get started, we can't stop there.
I think within our group, collaboration among different stakeholders and even within stakeholders, we need to believe in and exercise it. Without collaboration, we cannot achieve with individual, the aims.
So, just listening between the lines of what you said there, maybe that's not apparent at the moment. We're not all acting as if collaboration is going to be a key to this,
no,
but it has to be.
It has to be. Last Saturday we were at the International Chambers of Shipping's the event, as they are representing discussing with the top guns politicians, but all shipping companies, where is the port, where is the all the different stakeholders, let's hear their views. If you talk yourself, you are trying to create a lobbying for your own stakeholders. If you collaborate, you compromise, but you generate a shared, the way forward. You give up something for the bigger gain. But this is not, we are not seeing it.
Not seeing it yet, yeah. Okay, great. And we have another one from the table just behind you.
I have to tell you that I have got consensus from the whole table for this. It's just not me hijacking it. But we thought if we were aliens coming and landing, that this community that we saw before us thought that money is the key driver to our society.
Okay, that's great. I think that makes perfect sense of a lot of what we've heard today, and in terms of that description of the system. Okay, we're going to move on now. It's the last 30-minute discussion at the tables before we bring everyone together, and we try and work to the next sort of kind of stage of evolution of this. So the question, we're going to bring you another worksheet there, so bear with us just a second while that arrives. But let's just say we didn't believe those things that we've just said. What would be the alternative that we actually do believe? So we're not aliens anymore. We're actually in the middle of this. What are the things that we truly do believe about the system that we work in, about the challenges ahead of us? What are our values? What are our beliefs? What will guide our action going forward? And so we'll write it down. The worksheet has two columns on it. One is for those actual assumptions, values, beliefs, and the second column is what are a few high-level actions that we can take to put those into practice, things that aren't happening already or aren't happening enough already. So these will be the top actions, the highest priority actions that we want to take going forward. And just for variety, we're going to give you some hexagons to draw on, to write on. And as you populate this chart, they're quite big hexagons. So we're not looking for 24 ideas. We're looking for the real big ideas from this discussion. Again, we'll give you about 20 minutes on this, and then give you a chance for a proper break before we move into the last section of the day. You identified the apparent addiction to existing fuel sources before, and asked, what does recovery look like? Was that one of the assumptions that you managed to flip around and say, what we actually believe is this, and here's what we're going to do about it? Did that come up in your conversation over the last 20 minutes? There's like a microphone just behind you.
We didn't sort of come up with necessarily a new assumption, but just one of them, and I'm stealing this from Di. Is Di still here? Diane?
She was 2 minutes ago.
Right. Well, Diane, I'm going to steal her idea, and she'll fill in the information there. She did a huge amount of work around systems, and one of the ways to look at a ship in a different way is to look at it as a platform. So literally everything on that or everything that is that vessel is leased, for example, even down to the steel plate that could be taken off, recycled, and brought back again onto the ship. So you could have. I'm explaining your project here, Di. Yeah. No. Why? Well, that's your assumption. Di explains it way better than me, but it's looking at it more as a software issue rather than a hardware issue.
Okay.
And that starts to change pretty much everything you see and you do in relation to a ship. It doesn't become an asset, it becomes a platform.
Okay.
And I love that idea, and Di, you should push it through and explain it better than me.
Thank you very much.
So I'm sure Di is dying to push that one through, so we can get that. So we'll maybe come to that later in the afternoon. What happened on other tables? What were the new assumptions? What were the actual beliefs and values that you declared in these discussions, and what are the things that you can do to bring those into action? Any big insights? We don't have to share them out loud in front of the room just now if we're all shy, but you didn't strike me as the shy type. Oh, we have one from this table here. Oh, these ones are shy.
Well, I think what we looked at is the shared responsibility and accountability, which is locally, nationally, globally, but most important individually, us individually. If we take this responsibility, then we pay as a carbon, every amount of carbon that we generate, we pay for it. If we don't use it, we don't pay. But the part of that funding that generated should be allocated to the Global Greening Fund to fund the infrastructure in the poor countries. Because without them, without ignoring, from our comfortable life up here, we won't have the peace. We need to support them, and even in Africa, they don't even have electricity. So we tell them don't use electricity, or we generate the green electricity through infrastructure, so that we generate something that it is divided worldwide. That's the way we agreed. Thank you.
That's excellent. That's a good one. Time for one more before we take a break? Yeah. Oh, that's coming.
To do the hard thing, to accept the problem is real and face responsibility, and to really do what you need to do to change your actions and to really change the shape of the future, because it's not easy to say we have to totally change industries, we have to change our practices, we have to change how as consumers we act and our supply chains over the next 20 years, but we have to do it. And if the systems are set up that it's difficult to do that, then rebellion, say no. Otherwise, you end up extinct.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. That may be a good note to take a break on. Thanks very much for that. We'll gather in all these sheets from this afternoon's work, and they'll be used to give us the write-up of the event that you'll get in the coming days, probably days, maybe weeks, but probably days. There's fresh tea and coffee outside. Should be ready for us now. We'll take 20 minutes just now, and at 4:15 we'll come back in. What we're going to do in the last section of the meeting is we're going to put you back into maybe 5, maximum of 10-minute conversation at your tables, just to agree what you want to say next. And then we're going to give every table in turn 5 minutes to talk about what needs to happen next. So it's very action-focused, declaring what needs to happen next and what can be done next by you collectively and your individual parts within it. So let's take a 20-minute break just now. Tea and coffee outside, bathrooms that way. The outside world is just a little bit past the tea and coffee. Thank you.